Our second reading comes from the book of Esther, selected readings. Hear the word of the Lord. So the king and Haman went to Queen Esther's banquet, having earlier requested this. And as they were drinking wine on the second day, the king again asked, Queen Esther, what is your petition? It will be given you. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted. And Queen Esther answered, if I have found favor with you, your majesty, and if it pleases you, grant me my life. This is my petition. And spare my people. This is my request. For I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated. If we had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept quiet, because no such distress would justify disturbing the king. King Xerxes asked Queen Esther, who is he? Where is he, the man who has dared to do such a thing? Esther said, an adversary, an enemy, this vile Haman. And Haman was terrified before the king and queen. The king got up in a rage, left his wine, and went out into the palace garden. But Haman, realizing that the king had already decided his fate, stayed behind to beg Queen Esther for his life. Just as the king returned from the palace garden to the banquet hall, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was reclining. The king exclaimed, will he even molest the queen while she is with me in the house? As soon as the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Then Harbona, one of the eunuchs attending the king, said, a pole reaching the height of 50 cubits stands at Haman's house. He had it set up for Mordecai, who spoke up to help the king. The king said, impale him on it. So they impaled Haman on the pole he had set up for Mordecai. Then the king's fury subsided. Mordecai recorded these events, and he sent letters to all the Jews throughout the provinces of King Xerxes, near and far, to have them celebrate annually the 14th and 15th days of the month of Adar. It is a time when the Jews got relief from their enemies. It is a month when their sorrow was turned into joy and their mourning into a day of celebration. He wrote them to observe the days as days of feasting and joy and giving presents of food to one another and gifts to the poor. The word of the Lord.
Thank you. Thanks be to God.
All right, before I get going, quick moment of confession. A lot of pastors will have their sermons ready by Thursday, done and nicely manuscripted, and they walk away from it. I can't do that. Something too often has changed in our world, or my little world, whatever, that makes things a little haywire. So I must confess, a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, when I prepped this service, I had a certain understanding of this scripture, a certain viewpoint. Yeah, the last 48 hours have been kind of tumultuous as I've looked through this and taken another perspective. So this morning is going to be one of those 3-point deals. The ordination process, which I have experienced, and Bill and Peg have done so. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on any of this part. The ordination process is challenging to say the least. There's 2 types of obstacles, and I oversimplify. The first one is obstacles that are just in the process. Ordination exams, coursework, evaluations, just hoops that we have to jump through. I was once told that the real process is just see how many hoops the candidate is willing to jump through. The other type of obstacles are the ones that we put there. Things like self-doubt, fear. Well, I can't do that. I can't be a pastor because I can't talk in front of people. We have to overcome those too. Obstacles that are part of life and obstacles that we put there. I want to start with Haman. Nice guy, isn't he? Y'all don't agree. Haman is a victim of obstacles that he has put out there. Haman is very concerned about his position, perhaps his wealth. Mordecai just comes along and does a good deed. Mordecai might have been a Boy Scout. He helps the king out. Out of jealousy, Haman decides to have him and all of his people killed. Haman puts these obstacles out there. Obstacles that will create a rift between the Jews and the Persians. And it's these very obstacles that will cause Haman to downfall. He gets hung on his own gallows. We do that. We put up obstacles. We do it in everyday life. We don't even think about it. Somebody says, you know, I don't believe there were dinosaurs. And we look at them and go, what? That's a conversation killer right there. We kill conversations with our responses. How do you think like that? What were you thinking? Creates rifts. Instead of asking, why do you think that? Opening up the door to conversations. We put up obstacles all the time. And these obstacles do hurt us as well. They build walls. They destroy friendships. They drive wedges between people. I love it. There are people in this congregation that I've had conversations with that we disagree, and they keep coming in and telling me good morning. And they're not frowning when they do it either. We put obstacles up all the time. As followers of Christ, it's not what we're called to do. We're called to build bridges. That's the first point. That's the first point. And honestly, 2 weeks ago, that was the only point. But as I'm reading about Esther, she was a Jew. She was a woman. And she took on the obstacles of society and life. She became a Persian queen. And yet, even as a queen, she could have been killed for stepping in and talking to the king. One did not speak to the mighty Xerxes unless spoken to. She challenged cultural boundaries. She challenged the hierarchical boundaries. And she spoke out. She protested. And for those who say the Bible is absolutely filled with male dominance, I would point out she was listened to, and her words were acted upon. This was totally not normal. In most cultures of the time, she would not have been allowed to testify. Her word would have been discouraged, if not totally discounted. Haman, who was good friends with Xerxes, would have been well, safe, and protected. But Esther spoke out, spoke up, and saved not just her own skin, but the lives of her people. She could have been safe. She could have stayed quiet. That's a scary thing, to speak out against the many. That's a scary thing to go against the norm. We all face obstacles. We know what's right and wrong. We see injustices. But to speak up on behalf of those who are persecuted is uncomfortable. But our God does not call us to be afraid. Our God calls us to speak out, to speak up, to dare to risk all that the kingdom may be realized. That's the second point. Stop putting up our own obstacles and be courageous to overcome other obstacles. Here's the third point. Esther's a unique book. God's not mentioned in Esther. God's not in there. Go to the software, type in God. Esther does not come up. It's a goofy book. Just because God is not mentioned does not mean God is absent. Just because you cannot feel the presence of God does not mean God does not exist. Does not mean that the Spirit is not at work. We may be numb to the Spirit. But God's will is being worked out. It's an interesting book, Esther. It's interesting in light of today, where people are persecuted, where people are silenced, that the wealthy may stay rich, that the powerful may stay powerful. What is sacrificed in the name of human dignity. People are pushed to the wayside, told they're unimportant, they don't count. Each and every human being is created with a divine spark. Each and every human being has a gift, the ability to love, the ability to care, the ability to do something of value. Each and every human being has divine worth. If we become so frightened by the status quo, then that value is diminished only to humans, not to God. Mordecai fell to his own obstacles. Esther spoke out and was heard and listened to. Two examples. One, not to follow, one to admire. But in all of it, remembering that God is here and now. Let us pray. O Lord our God, we give a special thanks for Esther, whoever she was, wherever she was, as she stood up. She stood up and spoke out. A hero from biblical times. Somebody that we can admire and emulate. She spoke out not for herself, but for her people. Lord, we give thanks for Esther. We give thanks for all of our biblical role models. Most of all, we give thanks for your Son. Lord, give us the courage to follow in their footsteps, to be your children, to be the voice of those who have no voice. All of these things we pray in your name. Amen. As we come to our time of reflection, reflect on two things. What obstacles do you put out there? What obstacles do you need to take down? The second thing to reflect on is, what are you afraid of?